in our modern age, we're obsessed with, if we define something, we can understand it. If we can understand it, we can control it. If we can control it, we don't have to pay attention to it. And we do this in the political sphere. We do this in the religious sphere. We do this in the personal sphere. We do this relationally. We're obsessed with definitions.
Yeah.
Especially today, we're obsessed with definitions. And it's just, I mean, we could get into a whole philosophical conversation about how we view epistemology today and how epistemology functioned in times like the early church, right? That we tend to think that the people then think the same way that we thought now, but we don't even think the same way we thought 50 years ago.
Right. Well, this is definitely a point, I want to spend a moment on, because when I think of the differences between our mindset now and then, and certainly when people use terms like even like mysticism, or you think of these kind of the desert fathers being sort of hermits or living in the desert on kind of almost like a solitary lifestyle, not quite, but at least primarily it seems like they're separated from the other elements of society. But then what comes with that, at least in my mind, I always thought it seems like what goes along with that is very vague understandings of everything spiritual, and it's almost the opposite of what we're used to, where we think of all these very clearly defined creeds and beliefs and confessions and all this kind of stuff, and church doctrines and statements of beliefs, all these things. But yet, when you think of most of these kind of the mystics and a lot of the early church fathers as well, it's a much I don't want to say vague, but like just a different way of looking at things, to where it's not with as great, like it's not as specific or not as there's not that desire to define everything so neatly the way we want it. I don't know if you've noticed that from your studies, but at least that's what that was the perception in my mind, is where I think, it seems like these guys are just they're not clear on what they believe, but look at everything in a much broader way. I don't know how to describe it really.
Well, I think, let me try. I think what I've noticed about creedal Christianity, early creedal Christianity, let's say, right? Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed, Chalcedonian Creed, is what the creeds served to do was not to narrowly define, but was to bridge gaps so that people had agreement. And the thing is, what we try and do is I think one of the distinctions today is we try and narrowly define, whereas they were going, here's the point of agreement, the Chalcedonian Creed. Jesus is both fully man and fully God, with a human will and a divine will, right? That's essentially what the Chalcedonian Creed says. And essentially what they're saying in saying that is anything else is fair game. You can disagree on anything else.
Right.
Right. But this is our common point of agreement.
Yeah.
Right. The Nicene Creed, Jesus is fully God and fully man, right? That's essentially the Nicene Creed is Jesus is not less than God. He's fully God. Chalcedonian Creed is he's fully man in the sense that he has a will, and he's fully God in the sense that he has a will. And so that one has to do with the nature of the Son. The other one has to do with the nature of the human divine, hypostatic union, right? That's the Chalcedonian Creed. So what they're doing is they're going, let's define this and give ourselves common language so we can talk about these things, and then everything else we can disagree on. And there was major disagreements on lots of other points of doctrine, but that was okay, right? That was okay as long as it wasn't those points. These are the points that are non-negotiable. And so we think of them as clearly defining how everyone should believe, where they were thinking about it as clearly defining the points where we can bridge the gap, because you had the East-West divide, you had cultural divides, you had major differences between the Latin-speaking fathers and the Greek-speaking fathers. Both of those languages were very, very different in how they defined terms, the specificity of some, and the kind of the vagueness of some, so that the languages themselves created a cultural divide. And so they found places where they could agree and come alongside each other. Today, we find places where we can disagree so we can distance ourselves from each other. And we disagree over nuances rather than, frankly, we are almost a bit arrogantly entitled in that we take for granted the things that we agree on. And the early church couldn't take that for granted because, it's about 50-50 between the Arians and the non-Arians. And the Arians had mounted a pretty good case against the church. They were spreading like wildfire.
Right.
Arius
was the official kind of
it
belief.
Was. Yeah, it was. For a little while,
For a period,
actually. Yeah. For a little while, it was. And so, we tend to, we're gonna disagree between let's say Reformed and Antinomian, and so we're disagreeing over theories of salvation. We're not disagreeing over the nature of God, the nature of Jesus. We're taking that as granted, but now we question someone's salvation based on whether or not they understand a Calvinistic
right or Arminian
approach or Arminian approach. And you're like, well, these guys never would have argued over that in the sense that it was a salvation issue. They still would be charitable in their disagreements. And today we're not charitable in those disagreements. So there's a major difference in how we think about knowledge.